Hello. Welcome to the near close of the event, and glad that there's still some of you here. At first I was thinking, we don't clash with anyone else, so everyone will be here, right? But then I realized we clash with everyone wanting to go home, probably. So thank you. And obviously we're here to discuss the idea of conscious IT. Firstly, I'm Sean Holden, but we'll maybe discuss me and Filewave later. What we're here to really do is discuss you and how you think about your IT. So, why IT? For you guys, why IT? You're here for a reason, you do IT for a reason, and hopefully you enjoy aspects of that. Now, obviously, IT is a broad term. You'll all have your own kind of skills and expertise in what you enjoy doing. But do you like to think that you make a difference for the business or educational areas that you work for? So, as an example, just one idea, how many people have had this kind of question in an interview? Do you think outside the box? With that in mind, I'd like you to meet someone.
Do you want to call reference number? 646. We are now
Oh, hi, yeah, it's Dave. Dave, you guy from IT. Right. I guess it's okay. Hot and dark, though. Money saving. Okay. Huh. What's that noise? Just company policy. Okay. Thanks then. Bye.
Do you want to call reference number?
Thanks, Dave. Clearly, any similarity between Dave and anyone you may have met at this conference is completely coincidental. But I'm just wondering how many of you have had that kind of thing and then only found that you've gone and worked for a company and they've just put you in a box of restrictions when you start the role. And for me, I've always been in the feeling like, what box? Why am I limiting myself to the idea that there is even a box in the first place? I would argue that you should probably counter-question something like that, which is, does it mean you're going to put me in a box when I start working for you? So it's the idea of, do you get to express yourself in the work that you do? Is red tape preventing you from doing what you want to do? Or could you be doing something else despite the red tape, right? Could you be expressing yourself with the IT that you choose to do every day? So we're here to discuss the idea of making conscious decisions beyond just, do I have to upgrade all this software, right? And we then take those mindful kind of decisions and can we extend them in a conscientious way. So we'd like to use an example. So this is not just an example for your business or education, but goes much further beyond. We'll start with some quotes that I'm sure all of you have seen at some point in the past, right? We're not going to mention who made these quotes, but I think we probably all know. I've got one thing to say to that person, and that's Kovi Feifei, right? If anyone wants to question my pronunciation of that, feel free. I don't have a political party to back me up. So basically you win. Clearly, I can only think this word means I just make stuff up as I go along. Whatever. So on a more serious note, we're obviously discussing the idea of global warming, right? Clearly, this is something that impacts everybody. It's going to be incredibly hard to escape. And so, as an IT admin, what can I do? Is there anything I can do that can help with this, right? Well, one of the things is we can try and educate our users on the uses of their devices, right? Are people just leaving their machines on? Is there anything that's happening here that we can do to improve the situation? Now, we're all, I'm sure, using some form of management, so there is management tools that we can use. There's profiles, right? So we've got a certain amount of control that we can do on these machines. But arguably, can we go better? Can we analyze and remove an unnecessary use of devices, right? Now, with that in mind, we would therefore need to be able to observe what's taking place from an energy point of view, right? Is there anything that vendors offer for this? Do Apple provide any tools for us to do this? And then, are newer machines better? If we start looking at changing machines to newer types of machines, can this make the situation better as well? Now, we mentioned payloads. There's not a lot in there, really, let's face it. We know that we can put in sleeps and schedule that kind of stuff, or obviously screensavers as well. But as we said, like, that's a start, right? But what we'd like to do is, can we monitor this? Can we see our use and do something better? And so with that in mind, we're going to look at the idea of using a Grafana dashboard to try and monitor what's taking place on these machines at the moment. For anyone who's not familiar with Grafana, right, it's an open source tool. It provides analytics for charts and graphs. You can do alerts, that kind of stuff, right? We're clearly from Filewave, and Grafana is built in with Filewave. Right? You get it with the installation, right? Obviously, if you're not using Filewave, Grafana's open source. There's nothing to stop you setting up your own Grafana instance. As far as Filewave is concerned, for anyone who's not familiar with Filewave, Filewave started in 1992. The headquarters have been in Switzerland for some time now. For anyone who watched Greg Neagle's talk, you might be expecting something like that. Not anymore, right? Fortunately, we've moved on from logos like that back in the 90s. So Filewave is the longest running device management tool on the market, right? We manage Apple, MDM included, obviously. We manage Windows, including MDM. We manage Android, and we also have tool sets for Chromebook, right? So we go across the board. But back to the topic, right? What are the steps that we thought about when we wanted to do this project, right? So the first thing is, well, we wanted a custom field so the client can actually report what it's doing back to our server. Don't want to create new technology for this. Can we get the client to just do this as part of its reporting? We've got a server-side script that's going to basically look at that data that's coming back and then prepare it for Grafana. Now, to do that, we looked at using a Grafana plugin, and then at that point, we're into the dashboard, and we start making a panel so we can see what's going on. Before we look at the actual setup, I'd like to cover some examples of how we could use that, right? And so let's see how we can interpret data. So here's some examples. So this first one, we're just looking at 2 machines at the moment. You'll actually see there's 4 machines on the list, but 2 haven't been reporting, so we've got no data from those. Now, these machines were doing pretty much similar thing at the time. Now, obviously, one of them, we can see Safari and Adobe were doing a bit more work. The other one we can see actually needs a battery sorted. But we can see that the Pro machine, as it's named, much higher usage than the other machine. Does anyone want to suggest why that might be? Seems they're doing similar work. Nobody? Okay, so the Pro machine, it says, oh, my phone's gone in screen safe, there we go, is an Intel machine. and the other machine is an M1. So we can see immediately the benefits we can get by actually changing and updating to newer hardware, right? Way more efficient, right? My phone's still playing with me. There we go. Here's another example. Okay, we can clearly see we've got one machine drawing more power. So now we're getting some useful information. We're doing relative machines. One's drawing more. So we've got something we can look at. We can now go and look at that machine. Depending on what type of machine we're looking at, if they were the same type of machine, we'd be like, well, hang on, why is this user using that much more than everybody else? Is there a reason for it? Are they the sort of person that we need to consider having an exchange of machine if it was an Intel? Would they benefit from this, right? Notice we've also got some 0 points. That's good, because that's telling me that those machines were asleep or off, and then were turned on, right? So I've got some policy on them that was making sure they're going to sleep, not using energy unnecessarily. So here's another example of a machine that's got some 0 points on it, right? It's the local client script that we talked about at the beginning, which is providing that 0 point information, right? The server doesn't know when something will be 0. So from a server side, right, all it's going to do is report what the client's reported. So if the client hasn't reported 0, we just get nothing, like we saw on the first screen we had 4 machines, 2 haven't reported anything, right? So we can see that when we get a 0, the client's basically said it was off at that time. This are a series of video editing machines. Now in this one, anyone want to suggest what they might think of as interest if we looked at this data on this? What we might want to highlight here? Any offers again? Silence. Okay. For me, what I'm now looking at is actually the green line. I can see I've got machines that were 0, so they were off. That's good. They probably had some policy, so that's great. Then they were powered up and they started doing video work. Video work quite heavy, so we should expect high usage. But that other machine's just kind of looks like it's idling to me. So that's why they're telling me it's like not in policy or someone's not using it. It's just been left on. It's not going to into energy save. So I need to look at why that is the case. So we're not always necessarily looking at what's got the most data usage. We want to look at what data we're getting back and how we address that to improve the situation. Okay, so if we now want to look at the setup, right? So we've seen the examples. How did we get here, right? So we discussed the idea that we're using Grafana. We obviously need to work out how we present that data to Grafana so that we can just display it. And we talked about using a plugin. It's a CSV plugin. So the data that we're going to do is basically create a CSV and then pull that into our Grafana instance. And then we've just got a simple Python script on the server that's going to ingest that in a way that we can then use that through a panel. So we want data format. What is it? Well, it's simple. It's a CSV, right? What do we need? Not a lot. We need to know which device it is, when it reported a value, and what that value was at the time, right? So therefore, what does the script need to do on the machine? Well, the server knows what the machine is because it's reporting that data back. So all the device needs to do is just report back the time and the usage. So we've got a custom field. We're going to use a query to look at that. So here's an example of a custom field through Filewave, right? We can see we've got that long list of entries. Right? We can then build a query. So then we can have several machines all reporting. So I can choose how I build my query out. Okay. I've got my query. Now I want my server-side script. Right. Now I'm going to interrogate those queries. Right. So rather than doing everything in the script, I'm going to use the GUI to do some work and the script to do the other. It's a lot easier to build out the query in the GUI, but then I want to just look at what's in that query. So I can use our API documentation. I can get the query number, name, and everything from our documentation. So in my server-side script, I can then just reference that query. Right. I've got my titles that I need, right? They're relevant when we get to building the panel. I then work through the query to pull in all the data to then return it as a CSV at the end. then it's just a case of basically trying to write that out to a file so that we end up with the titles followed by the data, and then we've got our CSV. From a Grafana plugin point of view, we need to obviously ingest that data now, right? So we have to first pull in the plugin, right? We can do that from command line or the GUI, right? There's a command line there. Obviously, if you're not using Filewave, the command line will be different, right? You obviously put the relevant paths that you're going to need. This particular plugin is written by Marcus Ollison. It's very simplistic and works very, very well. Now, we also need to edit the Grafana ini file, which for Filewave is filewave.ini. If you're using the generic Grafana, it would be grafana.ini. But basically, we're just saying we allow this plugin to provide data to our Grafana instance. Then we get on to the actual trying to build out the panel itself. So we need to say where this data is coming from. We've got it in a file. So basically, all we're doing is we're just saying we want to use a data source. It's using this plugin, right? And then we just point it to the path of the file. And it's as simple as that, right? As far as building the panel itself out, we're looking at data over time, so it's a time series panel. If you look at Grafana, there's loads of different panel types you can do. It's a very, very good product. Here we want a time series one, right? We tell it that the data source, so that's the CSV that we just generated a moment ago. And then what we have to do is set up some transforms. We have to tell it how to interpret the data, right? It needs to know what the data type is. So for obviously the time of day, it's got to be a date, and we show it what the format is. And then there's the kilowatts, which is obviously a number, right? Then we've got the client script itself. So I'm going to assume most of you aren't familiar with Filewave. What we do as deployable items, we call them file sets. Right, we can just put files inside, they will appear on the machine where they're set, right? Here in this instance, we've obviously got some pre- and post-flight scripts to handle the launch daemon, to stop it and start it. And then we've got the actual file launch daemon plist and the script that it will run locally on the machine. That daemon's set to run every 10 minutes, so we're getting data every 10 minutes. And from a Filewave point of view, these files are set to be self-healing. So Filewave has got self-healing technology built in. If these files were to change, we would put them back as they should be. If you change them in the file set on the server, the client will then adjust that and go, okay, they've changed, I should have the same thing, right? So we have this self-healing built into our software. The script itself, we're just going to look at some of the basics. I mean, the other stuff's on there. I'm not going to feature all the lines, obviously. But we're obviously having to consider time here, right? So we need to compare the last line within the file with the current time, because if the machine is off, then obviously it can't report anything. The daemon's not running while the machine's off. So we have to cater for that. And so therefore, what we're doing is we're backfilling in values. If the machine was off on those times between the last time, we throw in a 0 until we get to current time, at which point we then put the value back in. So that's how we're making sure that we're getting 0 points. And then there's a custom field configuration server side to read that from the machine, and so we again get the information back from the CSV. Now, of course, what we've seen is a single file and a single panel, right? Which is all well and good, but I mean, if you've got thousands of machines, you're not going to want the single panel, right? So we want to broaden that if we can. So of course, we can set up multiple queries. The example here is that we've got ones that are internal, ones that are N1, but you might want to do it by department. We had the example of video, right? Maybe you've got paint artists, maybe you've got different rooms in schools, what have you, right? So you could start building out different queries based on how you want to target this and analyze what's going on. So from the server script point of view, where we said, oh, let's look at one ID, one query ID, we can change that to a list and then work through the list, right? Obviously, as we said, we can manage more than just Mac, so we could potentially do this for Windows as well. So I'm just going to jump out of here momentarily. So here's just, hello. We're not on the right screen now, are we? I'm going to have to move that. Where are we? Beep. There we go. Right. So here's an example of just a couple of graphs. We've got video artists and the paint. We can see that from a video point of view, it looks a bit daft, right? The data is a bit hard to read, right? That's because the default setting for a panel in Grafana is to make it so it will only show between the data points that you've got, right? But you can just go in and edit that. He says, looking very carefully, edit. And then if we scroll down, there's a minimum value, which I believe is there. And then we can see immediately, right, how that's changed the look. So it's a bit more easy on the eye now. We can actually get a better representation of what's going on, right? I could do an add in a panel as well. I should probably change the mirroring. If you want to add a panel, it's pretty simple. You come in here, as we said, we're a time series, right? You choose what the source is. I've got another one that's already pre-made, so we've got admin user machines as well. So I select where the source is coming from, and then the transforms that we discussed. So we need to tell it that we are converting the field types, and then you just choose from your headers which it is. So the timestamp, which we know is a date. Time. Okay, and the format, I've used default format, so that's going to be correct anyway. And then we just add another one, which is the kilowatts, and that's simply a number. Where's number? At the top. Okay. Now it looks a bit strange at the moment because we've actually got several machines, right? And that's because what it's doing is just trying to interpret that data as one graph. If we actually add another transform, which I'm going to struggle to read from here. Prepare time series. Right? And so what we actually have to do is tell it that it's a multiple frame. So now we're saying we've got various data points, we need to show them as multiple frames. Okay? So it's easy enough to add additional panels. Right. So back to our notes. We've done that. The future. What does the future hold for us? So this is initial discovery work. It's a project we came up with an idea that was relatively recent. Can we do something to make the situation better for everybody, right? Now, from our initial discovery, it's not looking good, actually. We only seem to be able to get the data from devices that have got batteries, right? Out of the tests we've done so far, which isn't great. And to take that a step further, in fact, we don't even get the current draw coming back if the AC is connected. So all we get is the voltage, which isn't a lot of use because that's not really telling us the power that we're using, right? If any of you, I doubt the Apple engineers are still here, maybe they are, has any leverage with Apple whatsoever, we'd love you to talk to them because we've set up a feature request with Apple. We want to be able for MDMs to be able to grab power usage and report on this because the planet is not getting any colder, right? We think it's a really important topic and worth putting the energy into it, right? So we would love for anyone that can to have a word with Apple. If there are any of them still here, come and talk to us, right? Because we think this is definitely worthwhile, right? And so there is the, was it still worth it? If we think about it, we're talking about laptops and iOS devices, and only if they're not on charge. Well, from a laptop point of view, I think in the last talk, a couple of talks, someone did discuss the idea that we want to do software updates, but the machine's less than 50. It's never on power, right? So actually, we are going to get a lot of data points coming back, because a lot of the time they aren't on power, we will see this information. But we're still limited to certain machine types. And obviously we want to address what we can to improve it, right? Any contributions are greatly received. We were considering putting this on GitHub. If anyone's got any suggestions where it should go, right? Or what, if you think you can do and find some information about how we can actually get more data, we want to hear from you, right? There's a lot of guys out there I know that are good at scripting. Talk to us, right? Because this could just be simply a repository for everybody, right? Whatever you're doing. So as an overview, yes, we talked about global warming, but the idea is about you guys being conscious about a decision that you make in your IT, not just have I updated something, right? I mean, how bored is everyone of updating Firefox and Chrome and whatever else, right? Day on, right? It's, can you do something that's more conscious for you, that makes you feel better, and makes you get to do something that you enjoy doing beyond that, right? Hopefully, this has maybe triggered something within some of you, right? I know there's some of you out there that do already do a lot beyond what is your everyday IT, but it's just trying to get you to think about how you sort of do your day-to-day, right? To make it more interesting for yourselves, right? Now for the really boring part. So I said, I guess I'll get to me eventually. I worked in post-production for about 15 years, and then eventually moved into publications for a few years, before ended up with Filewave, working in professional services, which is why I stand here now. From a Filewave point of view, would we like you to consider Filewave? Of course you would, right? If you'd like to just talk to us, we can show you what we can do, right? But at the end of the day, we think the topic's way more important than which MDM or management solution you use, right? So we're hoping that you take this on board and think about what you might be able to do for your business. It's not just going to save the planet, it's going to save you money, right? It's going to save people who are working from home money. It's going to help everybody, right? So hopefully there's something thought-provoking for you to take away from this today. Are there any questions?
There's one in the app.
Okay.
That's already been answered.
Go on then.
It was posted by Rebecca. It's probably one for the audience, which was, and maybe you should go to the app and post an answer. What is your first idea when hearing about conscious IT? Perhaps you can talk about the rationale behind the title.
Yeah, I say it was very much. If you look at sort of everyone's threads, and if you look at some of the tools that have been built, auto PKG has been something that's been discussed like in great depth because everyone's bored of just having to update stuff every day, right? And so it was very much started about what can you do? Are you happy just doing that? I'm sure most people would rather be doing something that's way more interesting from an IT point of view, learning some coding or whatever it is that you enjoy doing. Do you get to do that? Right? How often do you get to do that? Are you blocked by doing that with the way that the business you work for? Do they hinder you from doing that? And the idea was partly that and also partly what's happening in the world today. Right? So just wanted to kind of give the thought of what can you do to sort of step out of that? If you are blocked by red tape, can you still implement something like this? It's non-destructive, right? It doesn't necessarily need approval. It's not like it's going to stop, or if we upgrade this version, is everyone going to stop being able to work, right? It's behind the scenes. It's non-impactive on users. So can you then do something about that? Right?
There's another one that's just popped in.
Okay.
Actually, probably would have been quite good on the panel as well, this one. But could you also consider environmental burden for production of new devices, manufacturing, environmental impact, energy, materials, etc.? Then maybe life cycles could be balanced against impact of replacement. It's not directly for you.
Sounds like a statement rather than a question. Did I miss something there?
Sorry?
Yeah, was that a statement rather than a question?
Well, yeah, it's got a question mark at the end.
Sorry, can you do it? You better go do it again then.
Could you also consider environmental burden for production of new devices? Then
Right.
maybe life cycles could be balanced against impact of replacement. Discuss.
Yeah. Obviously, one of the things I thought about this was that the more often machines are not on, the longer life you're going to get out of them, right? You're not going to be burning through them so fast. There is that aspect to it. Now, obviously, that said, Apple are going to force you into updating your hardware every so often, right? The life cycle will naturally happen because you won't be able to update to the latest OS anymore. So you've already got that consideration where you're going to get forced into it at some point. But when you're having to question that against budgets and what have you, when you look, I understand like Intel M1 is a massive change. It's not like the next M to the next M is going to be the same kind of thing. But we saw the graph of the difference between what an Intel does to an M1. And so when you're trying to justify that change, maybe if you were looking at data like this as well, and you're trying to say to your boss, we should be changing the machines, if you can see that he's got other savings to come, right? Because he's got lower costs in the long run, then I think that's also something that's worth considering as well, right?
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Staying.